All right, welcome to a writing focus lecture. We're going to start, as always, with a screen share. And this is on rhetorical situation. So there's a couple of things to remember about rhetorical situation, and one of them is it's extremely important to understand the rhetorical situation of a piece you are examining or that you are looking at, just to be able to glean a better understanding of the piece. And the other reason to understand rhetorical situation is so that you can apply it in your own writing. So whether you're in one of my literature courses or one of my writing courses, this definitely applies to you, and this is something very important you should know. So what is rhetorical situation? Well, it's a list of different items, and the first of those is purpose. So thinking about the rhetorical situation, or the first item of rhetorical situation, thinking of the purpose of a piece of writing, why is it important to have that purpose in your own writing? Well, think about that for a minute. Why would you need purpose before you even begin to write? And purpose beyond because my teacher said so. And what is the most important thing to remember when setting the purpose for your paper? Well, when you're looking at it in terms of being a reader, what is the purpose of the piece? Understanding why the author wrote the piece can give you really good insight into the piece itself. So you can take these questions and kind of reverse them. So why did this writer create this piece? Why this specific item? And then our next one is going to be audience. So thinking of audience, what do you think you might need to know about your audience before you begin to write? Well, you might need to know the demographics. Are you writing toward the middle age group, middle school? Are you writing toward high schoolers? Are you writing toward fresh out of high school, newly into college? Maybe you're writing for the postgraduate level. Maybe your readership is that you're a non-trad student and you're trying to reach that same demographic of the non-traditional student. And so that's your target audience. Are you looking at a specific ethnicity for your target audience? Are you trying to reach a specific ethnic demographic, a specific religious demographic? All of those would actually help you to decide what sort of tone or language you're going to use. You're not going to use the same vocabulary that you would for a middle schooler who grew up out in the middle of nowhere as you would for a non-traditional student who's living in a big city. Their vocabulary is going to be different, their experiences are going to be different, so your tone is going to be different. And so understanding that helps you to know how to reach your audience. So when it comes to writing, you want to think in terms of your specific target audience. Can you picture that one individual you're trying to reach? Because if you can, it will greatly help you to narrow down your vocabulary and what it is you will be writing. In the opposite, if you're the reader, do you think you were the target demographic for this particular novel? I highly doubt that the author of Kife Tomorrow had a 30-something-year-old teacher in mind for this particular book. I'm going to guess that the author probably had in mind a high schooler and an immigrant. Doesn't matter which ethnicity, and it doesn't matter which country, just somebody who has immigrated into a city from a different country, because that's who the protagonist is. So understanding who the target audience is of the authors you're reading can also help you to gain new understanding and new insight. Our next item when it comes to rhetorical situation is genre. So what is genre? Well, most of you know genre whether you know this specific word or not. You either know it from the TVs and movies you watch or the music you listen to. It's that different classification. Are we talking about fiction, nonfiction, poetry? To be more specific, maybe we're talking about sci-fi, fantasy, post-apocalyptic. That's really big right now as I'm recording this with all the different zombie movies and zombie TV shows that have been coming out in the last several years. So these are different genres. Well, when you're writing a genre piece, it changes the tone as well, and it changes the elements that you would use. The same goes for if you're reading a genre piece. There's going to be different elements there than you would have for a different genre, and maybe some of them are mixed genres. Rom-coms. Not a big rom-com person myself, but I have a few students who are. And so I learned that, you have the strictly romance aspect and you have the strictly comedy aspect, and somewhere along the history of TV and movies, they mixed the two to create the rom-com. And so then you get an entirely new genre. I've learned that, we have a mix now of action and horror. We used to have straight horror movies, we used to have straight action movies, and somewhere along the way, they have merged and mixed. And so now we have a mixed genre. So when you're reading, understanding the elements of the genre will help you. They'll help you to pick out the themes. They'll help you to pick out the character attributes. They'll help you to see the plot line and the plot structure, because each genre also has this set plot that tends to happen. If you're writing, it helps you to create those elements. So again, whether you're one of my writing students or one of my literature students, this really does apply to you. Well, what do you mean by it changes how we see things? I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do a screen share of a piece I wrote. And this piece is very unique because it tends to mix 3 genres: research paper, prose writing, as if I'm writing fiction, and poetry. So you're going to see all 3 elements here. This is one of my favorite pieces. It's very short. I'm going to read it to you. You may want to listen to something really happy afterwards, just to give you a heads up. From depression to destruction. Tropical depression. The condensation gathers over temperate oceans miles from the nearest shoreline. Lightning strikes. The waters churn. A new depression gathers the forces of nature to build itself to the next level, to gain form and life. Together, hope, voice, desire, joy, identity, and willpower surround and insulate you in preparation for the gathering storm. Tropical storm. The organized pest looms closer, gathering warm ocean waters to the cause. The ceaseless rains creating new rivers and lakes where man once dwelled. Hope sweeps away in the rushing waters. Cat 1 hurricane. The growing nuisance dances in circles. Her eye catches the warmth of every living being in her path as she caresses them in her wind song. Words of comfort faintly reach the ears of the despondent few caught in the middle. Voice fades on the wind, choked out by force. Cat 2 hurricane. The menace grows more powerful, pulling vegetation from the ground and throwing lush green signs of life into chaos. All beautiful desire tended in the garden, uprooted, without a second glance from her malevolent eye. Cat 3 hurricane. The hazard continues to wage a warpath, causing structural damage to any wretched enough to be positioned in the middle of its erratic approach. Joy flees on jammed highways to escape, leaving behind loved ones and all it has worked so hard to achieve. Cat 4 hurricane. The pitfall chasms wider. Those left behind fall to their knees under failed roofs, their belongings soaked in the sorrow that rains down upon them. Identity is lost to the world outside the churning storm and howling winds. Cat 5, Hurricane. The peril causes complete structural failure, trapping everyone left under the debris. She screams like a banshee until the would-be survivors are unresponsive to all who come near. Willpower gives out and fades into the wailing wall of the storm. Disregarded by those returning from the safer inland areas, the near-lifeless survivors lay in wait for nothingness. Their numbness clenches at weakened hearts. All forms of comfort destroyed. There is no more hope, no more voice, no more desire, no more joy, no more identity, no more willpower. The storm takes all and leaves nothing for repair. So with this piece, I know that's a little jarring to come out of that after having heard that piece. With this piece, what we really have is a mix of genres. And I want you to take a moment to pause, reflect, think about, how would this piece be different if it had been a memoir? And a memoir is somebody's story. How would it have been different if it was a poem, straight poem? How would it have been different as a research paper? I took all three, I mixed them all together. How would this break down into the different pieces if we broke apart the genres? And, more to the point, what was the purpose of this piece? Who was the intended audience? How does that apply to the way this was written? So when you're thinking about writing, or when you're a reader and you're thinking about why the author constructed this piece and who they constructed it for, you can see that those two pieces alone can be extremely important. And they actually move us as we go from these pieces into our next, into stance. So what is a stance? Well, a stance is a personal position. It's your personal position, or it's the author's personal position. It's their beliefs. Well, with that in mind, is it possible to write without taking a stance on a topic? Think about that for a minute. Is it actually possible for you to write without taking a stance? And if so, is it easier to write when you take a stance or when you don't take a stance? Think about that. And what's the why? Why do you think one is easier than the other? Interesting questions, right? One of our other key components that we do have to consider, especially in today's world with technology, is media design. So when you're reading or when you're writing, you do have to take into consideration the medium that's being used. Maybe you're listening to a podcast. That's a form of media design. Maybe you're listening to an ebook. That's another form of media design. Well, maybe you're looking at an article or a blog. Again, media design. Think about how these could affect a piece of writing. And those vloggers, bloggers, the podcasters, they all have to have content created. So they all have to write something in order to have this vlog, this podcast, this ebook, even those audio visual components have to have some sort of content written. So then what are you taking into consideration when you're looking at that media design? Well, you're thinking about how it's going to be presented to your reader if you are the writer. So are there quotes that you're going to have stand out and make a little bit bolder? You know, you have all your text and that quote is there in the text, but you're creating a blog post or you're sending this into an article and they want you to format it for how it would look in their online literary magazine. So you would need to take into consideration how you would break that into chunks, because maybe they've got advertisements that are going to run in between. Maybe you do need to bold that one quote so it really stands out and your reader sees that first, and then they read to find where it fits. So these are all considerations when you are doing the media design. What images would you include? Where would you include them? How would you include them? If you're the reader, you're thinking about how this media design affects you, the reader. You know, maybe you're listening to a podcast of one of your favorite stories because you don't have time to read. Let's face it, we are all bombarded with informational text. We are reading all day long. It becomes a lot. So maybe, just maybe, looking at that media design, they've added sound effects, they've got different voices that they're using, and it makes it come more alive for you than it would if you're just reading it yourself. All of these things affect you as a reader. Think about if you're watching a movie versus the book you've just read. Maybe you read a really good book, you really enjoyed it, you found out it was a movie, so you're now watching this movie and you notice these subtle differences. Well, why would they have those differences? Why would they change something that was in the book? Or how are they relaying something that, you know, comes off really well in the book, but you got to find a new way to present it in the visual? So all of these are things you have to take into consideration. These are all media and design, and they all affect you, the reader / viewer, or if you're the writer, they affect you as the author and presenter. Interesting things to take into consideration. So what does this mean for you and your writing? I want you to think beyond classroom and beyond me as the instructor. How does this affect you? Because you are creating content every day. And how is your real audience for whatever piece you are creating going to see this? Did you take all those things into consideration before you posted on Instagram, before you posted on Facebook, before you created your blog post that you shared out to the world, before you created your vlog that you shared out on YouTube? You know, whatever content it is, are you actually taking these into consideration? Who is your audience? Are you speaking directly to your audience so that you can attract more? Because I guarantee you that when M.K. Asante wrote the book Buck, he did not have a 32-year-old woman, mother of two, who grew up in a town of 120 in the middle of Iowa as his target audience. I guarantee that. And yet, he captivated me with his memoir because it was so well written, but it wasn't written with me as that target audience. So do keep in mind that having that specific target audience in mind and writing to that target audience will make it so that you're actually more diversified and you reach more audiences, which is incredible. So whether you are reading or writing, you do need to know these things. If you are writing, I do want you to imagine your target audience. Maybe find an online literary magazine that would fit what it is that you're hoping to accomplish. And then write with that audience in mind. If you're in one of my literature courses, I want you to be thinking about these items as you're reading and trying to figure out who the author had in mind for their target audience and why, and what were they trying to say and what were they trying to convey. All right, that's all I have for you for Rhetorical Situation. I hope you found this very helpful. If you're in one of my writing classes, you may need all of those points for rhetorical analysis. So if you didn't take notes, you may want to go back and do that, or even just pause the video at the key points so you can just jot down each slide as it was shown. Any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, send those through the Learning Management System inbox so that I get just your concerns, just your emails, and I can get to you right away. All right, guys, catch you on the flip side.